Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this month's Snack and Chat, a reoccurring segment where we come together to discuss topics that are top of mind to adoptive, kin, permanency, and customary care communities across Ontario and beyond. For
Mm.
those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine, and I have the privilege of hosting these chats with professionals, lived experts, and basically all overall inspiring people within our communities. If you aren't familiar with Interwoven Connections, we're formerly known as Adopt for Life, and we are a not for profit charitable organization that provides free peer support, community, education, advocacy, and awareness. You can learn more about us and gain access to valuable resources by ensuring you both like and follow us on our public Facebook page right here, and also going to our website, www.interwovenconnections.ca. I'll make sure that we put that in the comments as well for those who might be interested. We are so very honored to have you guys here so that we can talk about lessening the impacts of judgment on AFCA. I think this is a huge topic and something that so many people who live with AFCA in a day-to-day life deal with and manage, and there's a lot of shame and stigma. So we're just very excited to have you, Mode, to join us and to talk about this topic. Um, I would like to pause and acknowledge first the lands that we are situated on today. I do understand that we're coming from various places within this beautiful province, so I just ask that you take time to reflect on your personal territory and treaty. I personally reside in, excuse me, I apologize. I personally reside in the traditional territory of Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash unceded First Nations and the Saugeen First Nations within Treaty 18, which is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We do this to commit and to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations, and as a first step towards improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. To recognize and acknowledge the historic and ongoing devastating effects of colonialism and racism in the name of assimilation across Canada, and to consider how we each can, in our own way, action forward in truth, in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. We do want this to be an engaging and interactive lunch hour, so please feel free to comment below. You can share comments, you can ask questions, engage in the content, everything that we're talking about. We'd also love to learn where you're logging in from, so do feel free to jot down your city in the comments. That being said, please know that this segment is live and it will be shared publicly across our social media platforms, meaning that this can be accessed anytime. So we do ask that you remain mindful of any personal or sensitive information, especially information of children or youth who are in your care. Tried to get through that as quick as possible because we have so many questions to go through. But very quickly, I do want to formally introduce my esteemed colleague, Dr. Maude Champagne. Maude, I have to put the doctor in there. It's very exciting for all of us. Maude brings a wealth of clinical research and personal experience to Interwoven Connections. As a mother of 5 through both birth and adoption, Maude's children joined her family as older adoptees. She holds a PhD, newly graduated actually,
Mhm.
in neurosciences from Queen's University, specializing in FASD, trauma, and AFCA, and she is a registered social worker and psychotherapist. Mode has contributed to programs like the FASD Key Workers Program in Vancouver and is also a sought after bilingual speaker passionate about supporting families with practical strategies and resources. That was honestly just the Coles notes of who Mode is. So if you do end up on our website, you can read a little bit more about how just incredibly amazing she is. That's why I am pumping you up today, Mode. So
Yeah, yeah. I have something interesting to say.
So, okay, I'm just gonna jump into the questions because I was trying to get through the intro as quick as possible. I don't think we're gonna get to all of them, but let's just start. So, can you just very quickly, before I get into the questions, can you explain what AFCA is, just for someone who
Mm.
might be new and wondering why I'm using this acronym?
Okay. So AFCA stands for Aggression Towards Family members and caregivers during childhood and adolescence. And it's basically a pattern of behaviors that are harmful to family members. And we're not talking about minor things here. We're talking about any behavior that will lead to physical harm, emotional harm, that is really impacting the safety of all family members. And that would often include the person who's displaying these behaviors. And in adoption, we often see that there's more than one child displaying these behaviors in the same family. And now we have at Interwoven Connection a program specifically designed to support these families.
Thank you. I totally just threw that on there, but I realized as I was saying the acronym, I'm like, not everyone's in the AFCCA realm, although everyone needs to know about it regardless of their experiences. Okay, the first question is, from your experience as a clinician and as a parent in supporting so many families, what are the most common judgments that parents and caregivers of AFCCA children face?
Mhm. So I think the main problem is we're used to look at the child's behavior to assess parental capacity,
Mm,
right? We think, okay, oh, this kid's behaving like this, what about the parents? This is how we're trying to think.
yeah,
And when you have a child with complex needs, trauma, different diagnosis, mental health issues, that's not how we're supposed to assess parental capacity. I mean, we have parents in our community at Interwoven who are raising children who are highly complex, and they are parenting way more intensely, way better than many other adults who are parents and don't have to do all the things that our parents have to do just to keep their family safe, right? So I think that's a really big misconception. And we see that in the news sometimes, that like, where are the parents? Or things like that, right? And it's very damaging because it's a lot more than parenting, how our kids are actually behaving. So yes, and AFCA is all about behaviors. So, we're talking about the judgment here. And I would add that in our community, it's never one thing. Like, we're talking about the judgment surrounding AFCA, like judgment of having a child who displays dangerous behaviors. But there's multiple layers to that in our families. Like, is it also the judgment of it's not a child that was born to you? Are these relationships as important in our society? I'm just talking about people's perspective.
yeah,
And does it hurt less because it's not your birth child?
yeah,
And what if you're not Caucasian, middle class? Like, this brings other layer of what we call intersectionality that could bring even more judgment in the family when there's AFCA. So it's like, yeah, there's, I think, many elements to what families can experience in terms of feeling judged
yeah.
or
And
being judged.
I think it's so easy for us as parents who are living with AFCA to judge ourselves. And so when you have those comments or when you see those things, well, we're the parents, or well, clearly you're not, you just let your kid do whatever they want, or all those things that kind of come out. It kind of, for some families, for me specifically, I can say, like, it just kind of reconfirms the shame in the judgment that I have in my own head. And so it gets more complex when you're trying to battle your own demons, so to speak. Um, who are the primary, in your thoughts anyways, in your experience, who are the primary sources of judgment for AFCA families? So is it more like other family members? Is it our educators, medical, general public? I'm just wondering, like, where are these judgments coming from, and how does it actually impact the family dynamics?
Mm-hmm. Or their well-being, really.
Yes.
I think could be anywhere. Like, the general population, like I said, we have those statements where um, we think that this is based on parenting, that the child behaves a certain way. So, it will lead to things we read, little comments that people make, or even with professionals, like I would say school, very often, like some of our kids who display AFCA will tell stories at school of what actually happened. It's not necessarily accurate, especially if they have something that we call confabulation in the context of FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So that can really harm family members. And like you said, I think it's how we feel, and then it's sort of like confirming how we feel, right? This is something we call confirmation bias. It's if you're already believing something, you will be more inclined to find the information that is actually confirming what you're believing. And what we're seeing is that you can also, in a way, reverse it. It's like if you start believing in your competence again, and you have stronger voices around you to make you feel competent, to remind you of your competence, then this might be easier to just shut down those voices that don't really matter.
Hmm.
And now I understand that I may not have fully answered your questions, but
No,
because
no, it's
where is
good.
judgment coming from? I think it hurts more families when it's coming from friends
Mm,
and family of like people they care about. Um, and there's a certain level of understanding, I think, among us as adoptive families or, kinship, customary care, that if someone hasn't had the experience, it's very possible they don't understand and like, okay, like I'm just gonna forget about this. But if it's recurrent and you're not doing well, it's worse.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting as you were sharing about like the confirmation bias in one of our private, like the AFCA groups that we have. I've seen so many countless times, and I'm sure I've also posted about situations where I've been judged or something happens and people talk about how they're feeling or they feel like a failure, they can't, the shame and the guilt. But it's just amazing to have the support from other families who are like, first and foremost, like what happened isn't okay. Second, this is not who you like, this isn't, a judgment of who you are as a parent. This isn't a, you know, this isn't reflective of how you're responding. And I think that's what kind of makes this program so special, is that not only is there that clinical support and so much research and so many tips and videos and support groups, but there's also families who are fighting that judgment. And for me, I found hearing other families and how they respond to it has been helpful for me. I'm totally jumping the gun in probably these questions. Like for me, a big thing for my family,
Yeah.
um, is that a lot of medical professionals suggest for me to give up care of my eldest daughter. It's just a common thing, and they're trying to be helpful. But in my case, I'm like, would you be asking me this if this was my biological child? I
Mm.
posted that in the group, and I now actually go into these meetings prepared to say, this is what I'm going to talk about, put those boundaries. Like, it's not an option. So let's not talk about going down the giving up care. We're going to go down this way. And I found like having the strength of that community has been super helpful for me, at least. And I'm sure for so many other families as well.
Yeah, you're so right. I think it goes back to the concept of voices.
Mm,
Like if the voices of judgment are too strong and you don't have those voices of like, as we as a community understand exactly what you're facing, what you're going through, because we've been through it and it's not in your head. We're behind you. You do feel like you're going there with those voices too, that you're
yeah.
equipped and being able to name it. Um, I'd
Hmm.
say I've been in meetings where, I had parents going, okay, could you come to the meeting? And I think it's really good when we have meeting, we know there's going to be blame, judgment. Maybe you want to bring someone else. And in some meetings, it's clear, they are judging, like there's horrible comments.
Yeah.
But in some cases, there's this dual reality that judgment has been internalized. Parents are highly traumatized, and maybe there's people they should trust, but gaining trust is really
Mm,
hard, right? So it's like you don't want to minimize or invalidate the person's experience, but some parents are so traumatized by professional, but that even when they could probably trust that person, The person's not really judging them, but that's how they feel. Like it happened to me, like as a parent, where I've been judged so many times, or there were comments about my parenting, or like, and we provide a different kind of parenting when we adopt children,
Yeah. Yeah.
attachment type of parenting, and and I think, looking back, were situations where people just didn't know how to help, right? They had no clue what to say or what to do, and they ended up pointing the silver lining, but in a way, it's minimizing your situation. It's invalidating. So it's kind of like tricky, right? It's this dual reality of like, sometimes you're really being judged, and sometimes maybe it's internalized judgment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I 100% agree. 100%. I totally brought us off kilter in our conversation, but I think this is important discussions. We talked about the internal and the external, and I'm wondering, like, how do these judgments, I think both that we have on ourselves as parents, but also from other people, how can they affect like mental health of parents and caregivers? And I think we've seen this a lot in our groups, and a lot of support that you provide for families is around mental health. So I'm just wondering, like, how do you think this impacts it?
Mm, I think as we know more about it, there's all sorts of terms that are, you know, um, to describe this experience. Like some people call it block care, filial trauma, parent erasure, we all adjustment disorder, post-adoption depression. Like there's so many now. Um, and it all describes very similar things where either the person's highly anxious or very depressed. A lot of parents will describe, like they would say things like, I don't feel like I'm human anymore, like, and they go to a place that is very extreme in some cases, and some they won't. Um, but one thing they have in common is the self-worth. Like,
Mm.
and maybe a change in their identity. So for example, if my identity is, I want to be a good parent, I want family unity, I want to be the kind of family that's like, we're all sitting at a table and it's calm, and like, you know what I mean?
Is that a thing?
This is really not the experience here, like you're like, your standard is like, let's just, survive the meal and eat
Yeah.
something else, and, hot dogs, and right? So I think it's like, it's really changing the perception that they have of themselves.
Mm.
And it's like, then who I am as a parent, who I am as a person. And then if you add the judgment of other people, like you said, you're already judging yourself. It's like going to affect your emotions, your mental health, and your behavior. Like emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, it's like a triangle. It's always intertwined. And sometimes changing just one thing can really impact the rest. And for some people, like I'm very cognitive, like I have all those mantras that I use. I'll read a book about it, like watch a documentary, and like this is really helping me shift my mind. Or I'll be more like in action, like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. And other people are like really into their emotions and trying to analyze, why do I have this self-talk? And this self-talk leads me to feel this way. And do you know what I mean? And they're changing their perspective. Um, some people who are experiencing AFCA, their situation doesn't change. Like the child will still struggle with aggressive behaviors, but the parents somehow feel better because they feel like they're not alone, they're not crazy, and they're competent, and they have their self-worth back. And it goes a long way in terms of recovering and feeling like you're reclaiming your well-being, you're reclaiming your quality of life. Um, I don't think we've seen so many families who have done NVR, then they go on a vacation or they renovate the house. Not because all of a sudden they have tons of vacation. It's more like, how can I reclaim who I am as a person? Um, and I think sometimes it's like when we're in that vicious circle of feeling bad, we feel like we need to prove to other people that we're good parents.
Yeah.
Um, And like, I'll give just an example, like her parents in the AFCCA community, they're very reasonable. Like, and like the kids will ask them like things like, I'm just gonna exaggerate here, but like I'm 8 and I want an iPhone, and they feel bad because they already feel bad as parents. They feel bad to say no and to set boundaries sometimes. And they're like, because the child is making them feel terrible. Um, and I think that's part of it too, right? Like they already feel like bad parents, then the child's confirming it.
The guilt comes in, the guilt, and
Yes,
then, yeah,
yes.
the cycle continues.
The cycle
I
continues.
think it's really important though, and I think a big takeaway is that for families who may be in this kind of cycle where they are feeling the judgment, where they are, the triangle that you're talking about. Um, I know there's been times where I felt that I was so burnt out or so done that researching and looking into it was just so beyond my capacity. But it's just for me, I feel like it gives me a bit of hope knowing like maybe if I focused on my own emotional side of it, that might be more doable, and then it would impact the cycle as well. So I think it's important to know for families who are might be listening and in the thick of it that there's other ways to approach it as well, and getting that validation. If anything, getting that validation could be a small step. I think it's helped for me at
Yep.
least. At least someone saying, "Yep, this is not a good situation." I was going to swear. This is a bad situation. I hear ya, and let me tell you about the situation that happened to me. I'm like, "Okay, I'm not alone in this." So, um, I think people maybe underestimate the importance of that sometimes, especially if you're being judged, and there's been so many times where I've been out in public and my kids are having not just a tantrum, but like an AFCA meltdown where people are like, "Oh, just give them a spanking," or, and this," and, you know,
Yeah.
my responses aren't always appropriate, I'm sure, but this kind of leads into the next question. So, um, what are some practical strategies that you can recommend for caregivers who can help them lessen that emotional impact? I'm wondering if you have like very like specific suggestions for families.
I think more and more this is something that keeps coming up of parents really feeling the burden of judgment, and this is really affecting their mental health and well-being and their self-talk. And again, I'll go back to the idea of voices. What's the story you're telling yourself?
Mm,
So your own voice. um I told people like, and I've done it to myself when there was like this major crisis in my family. I wrote, sorry for the word shitty, but like a
yeah.
shitty first draft.
Yeah.
That's how Brené Brown calls it, and it's
Yeah.
in the book, Rising Strong. And then you go back to it and you go, okay, is this all true? And
Mm,
like, what are the evidence that maybe it's not really what's happening here?
I love that.
Like for example, your sheet first draft could be, I'm a terrible parent, and here are the proof. Oh, and then after you look at it, okay, what are the evidence that I'm actually a good parent?
Mm,
Right? And like, so you rewrite your story, you're changing your narrative, and who in your life is able to reinforce that?
mm,
We have a webinar on, can't remember what it's called, but it's with me and Erin Perron, who's an IPC on our team, and we talk about growing your circle of support, how
mm,
to train your supporters. Honestly, so many people are well intended, they have no clue what to do. They know regular parenting. We do nonviolent resistance in our group. When we do the psychoeducational sessions, we have the siblings of the parents, the grandparents, and it's so encouraging to our families to see, wow, your relatives are, making time to come and learn about this type of parenting. And some of them are like, like end of their 70s, and they're like, I need to learn this. I need to support my adult children. And it's beautiful. So there are people out there who want to help, but they usually need more information. And when we say to help, I'm not saying like taking your kid for a week. I'm just saying, can you text that person and they know what to say? And Tanya and I, and even the IPC, they can help in having those meetings and reframing what's actually happening, There's another mom who told me, like, anytime she hears those judgment in the community, you know, by professionals, school, she makes sure that she's writing in her journal the opposite, like what's
Mm,
actually true, or call someone who knows your truth, who knows it's not true. um as you know, like, I do a lot of work around nonviolent resistance, and it's always the idea of resisting. So you cannot change someone's behavior. You cannot change that they're judging you. This belongs to them, not to you. How can you resist it for your own well-being? And there's different ways to resist it, to block it.
yeah,
Does that make sense?
100% it does. I resonate with all. I love the
Okay.
like doing those drafts, because I think in the midst of it, when you're feeling it all, that's when the all irrational thoughts and everything
Yeah.
comes down. And that's what I start to spiral myself. And um it's very important. Oh, someone just posted that the webinar that you did was navigating AFCA together, a guide for family supporters. So I will make sure to put the link in the comments below, whether you're watching it here on Facebook as well as in YouTube, just to watch it. It was an incredible webinar, and I think it's important to know that for all the people who may be judging because they don't understand it or they don't get it, there are people who do
Mhm.
who do care and who do think that, you know, parents and caregivers are rock stars and who are trying their best, and no one is perfect. And I think that was a hard pill for me to swallow, both as an adoptive parent but also as an AFCA parent. Like, it's not always going to be perfect. um for me, in the midst of it, like, I learned that having like pre-planned things to say has been important, because if not,
Yes.
I open my mouth and I can't always control what comes out, especially when, meltdown in public. So I've had a few pre-planned things of what to say during a behavior and during an episode, so that um, I feel a bit more in control and that I can set some boundaries. That's been helpful. Because yeah, in the midst of it, it's just you're so vulnerable. And I've always been worried, like, are the children going to hear that judgment? They don't need that either. So being able to talk to my kids about it, I think, has been important for me personally as well. um okay, well, we've kind of talked about this, but I'm going to bring it up anyways, just in case we've missed something. So how can being part of a community like AFCA, these support groups, advocacy networks, how do they help mitigate these feelings? So we kind of talked about that validation piece, but is there anything else you think that we've kind of missed about how important it is to have communities like this?
Hmm. I was reading recently on, it's really hard to pronounce for me, okay, but it's unfranchised grief, okay?
Oh,
It's like
unfranchised grief. Yes.
unacknowledged grief.
Yes.
So hard to say. Anyway, so it's the type of grief that is not acknowledged by society, and I think it's a common experience in adoption, even more so in the AFCA. So, like, all of us, when we adopted, we envision having a good relationship with our child, something positive, shared joyful experiences, um, and that maybe, like, we could explore things with our child, and like,
Go to
nice things.
Disneyland and skip
Go
it to
to
the
Disney
sunset.
World, and, like, not having a freaking flower pass at the children's hospital. So I think, and this leads to grief.
Yeah.
And it's something that's really difficult when you have unfranchised grief. I said it right.
Yeah.
It's the lack of acknowledgement. So it's hard to grieve. When you're grieving, you need to be witnessed. You need
Mm,
to have other people listen to your story without minimizing it, without underlying the silver lining behind it. Um, you really need the person to understand the pain. And there's nothing like having someone who has gone through the experience.
mm.
And it's even really good when you can hear someone who has gone through the experience and is on the other side of it.
Yes.
And
Yes, to give you hope,
I,
or to let you know what it looks like or what it can feel like. That's huge.
yeah. And just naming it, you're feeling judged right now. this is judgment.
Yeah.
And it feels terrible. You're probably feeling like a bad parent because you already felt like a bad parent. And it's right, like just saying these things out loud, naming it for the person, it will help them make sense of their story and what they're feeling. Because sometimes their feelings become so big and it's like all intertwined. Like for me, like I had moments in my life where it felt like a big pile of dirty clothing, but
Mm.
you need someone to like pull one the item
One dirty
at
sock out.
a time, right? Like not like you're trying to pull a sock and like the rest of the pile,
Yeah.
but then you're like, oh no, like this is really bad. um, so yeah, I think peer support is huge. I would also add that having a supporter that's maybe more of a professional or, I had people in my life where they were like mentors, not necessarily like professionals, but coming to meetings with me to help me maybe reframe what was said in the meeting. Do you think it was judgment? What do you think they meant by that? Like when things were really hard. Um, Having that trust in this person who understands, like maybe that's a peer in the AFCA community or interwoven community who can really understand your perspective, but sometimes able to challenge it, right? You trust them enough to go like, is this me? Like, how do you think we should address it? Because there will be judgment sometimes, and sometimes it's not worth the fight. If you like, for me, like in my temperament, maybe I'll go with after all the fights, but this is actually very unhelpful.
Yeah,
So it's like
exactly.
having someone to like, okay, so that peer support is huge. The
Mm.
last thing I will add, there's this really good paper that was written recently in Australia by Dr. Gibbs. It's for FASD and parents who are experiencing aggression from their child. And it's called No One Came to Help and No One Believed Us. And being believed is huge. And I think it's sort of
Yes.
like the antidote to judgment. So sometimes, like what I do for my families is like, if they feel like there's a professional who really doesn't believe them, that this is not as bad or it's their parenting, I say, do you want us to have a meeting? And I can explain to the person, yes, it's true. This is
Yeah.
actually what's happening.
Yeah.
And you are good parents, right? They're not making this up or they're
This
not
up.
exaggerating. They're not being dramatic.
Yeah.
So I think, and even that's a good message for professionals. It goes a long way to just showing the person, I believe you. I really
Yeah.
mean, that's really
Yeah.
hard.
It's happening. That happened to me a lot in the school system is that we don't see that. And then it was like, am I making this up? And then I started questioning, like, am I? Is it not as bad as I'm saying it is? And it wasn't until a situation where my child had a episode at school and they were like, oh, like it shouldn't have had to get to that point, but
Oh,
to
exactly.
finally get that validation is huge. I do want to say in the comments, there's a lot of chatter about the unfranchised grief. Do you know where people can learn more? Is there something like a link that we can maybe send people later on? Um, if not, I'm putting you on the spot here. We will take that
Yeah.
off. And I'm sure there's something that we can share because there's a lot of conversation about what it is and people hearing it for the first time. So we'll make sure to send that resources and the article as well that you talked about. I'm going to link that in the comments as well because it's just good resources for people to have. Okay, I'm aware we only have 10 minutes.
Mm.
So I'm going to just go down to last question, just that I think that is very important. This is question number 9. How can parents support siblings in dealing with judgments and misunderstanding related to AFCA? So we talked a lot about us as parents and caregivers, but I think it's important to bring siblings into this because it's an extra added layer of complexity for families. So what do you think? What can parents do to help support siblings?
I'll just add that I made a video recently on siblings and FASD, and I do talk about this part as well.
We'll link that as well in the comment, people who are
Yeah.
watching.
And
Yes.
like there's different resources that I had sent after a presentation I did. So from a research perspective, what we heard from siblings, and they made like a tip sheet for parents, and I'm like, parents know that. They know like the siblings may feel neglected and they may feel like, oh. Um, but the parents need the support of the community for, to support the whole family. There's other aspect, I said it at the beginning, like in our community, it's not like there's one sibling who has the neurodevelopmental disability, like Down syndrome, and then everyone else is neurotypical. Like it's usually a big melting pot of diagnosis.
Everything.
The
What do we
same
call
time.
it? The diagnostic soup, right? The alphabet soup that
Yes.
everyone seems to get. Yeah.
Exactly. And like beyond diagnosis, like in my family, I have kids like from orphanages, from other, like, do you know what I mean? Like they all have a story that complicates things and different ethnicities and cultural background and stories. Um, and the way they came to us also. So there's that level of complexity that could not just the judgment of the behaviors, but also for families being formed through adoption, and then these extra layers around ethnicities and multiple languages and all that. What siblings shared in the research is it's so similar to parents. Parents
Mm.
say, I want my feelings to be validated. This is what siblings said. And recognizing that while they see the challenges in their siblings, they love their siblings.
That's
And I think that's what we like with other adoptive parents. I could say, Catherine, I'm really struggling here. Like, it's so annoying. And like, but you do know I love my
of
child.
course.
You know
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it's
Exactly.
like, and sometimes when there's judgment around adoption, we don't really want to say that. So it's like,
You
and
have to
it's
pick your audience sometimes. Where is this safe to say? Yeah.
yes, exactly. Like, so, like that balance of like, I'm really upset right now. I don't like their behaviors. It's really hard. We're struggling as a family, but I love my siblings. And sometimes children, the broader sense of the term, they're usually very in the moment. So
Mm,
they may say, I hate my siblings and share that to someone. But in the moment, they hated the sibling. Do you know what I mean? That's how they felt, but that's not the feeling they're landing on.
right.
And this is something we need to acknowledge. And something else, and when I give this tip, I try to internalize it because I'm really bad with this. It's like when your child comes up with something they're struggling with, we want to rescue. It's just so hard to just listen and sit with the feeling without feeling the need to say, but, or, like wanting to soothe right away. And we don't want that for ourselves. Like, we want the person to listen and hear the pain and maybe sit with us in it for a while. And the same goes for our kids. And I think, and not to put more pressure to families, but if they are, and again, it's true for parents and siblings, if we have other outlets in our life beyond our kids, beyond the parenting experience or the family experience, like, let's say I do dancing, I go to the gym, I feel very competent, I do these other things that are unrelated to this, it's a buffer against adversity. It's a buffer against judgment because you're actually feeling good about yourself in other aspects of your life. Hopefully you will too, but it still acts as a buffer, and we want siblings to be supported as well
Of course.
in this. Um, it's also like, I think NVR helps a lot in terms of I'll talk about the voices again, but like sometimes there's one child that's more problematic
Yeah.
in the home, and that's the voice we keep hearing, and then sometimes we remove that voice, and then there's other voice who go because these needs were not addressed before. So whenever we can prevent that by having like the stronger voice, recentered differently using NVR, then maybe the voices are not as strong, and then there's a better balance, if that makes sense. People who have done
Yeah.
NVR will be like, okay, yeah, I know what she's
I
talking
get it. Yeah. I know those
about.
terms. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, so I think that these are some of my tips for siblings, but it's hard because a lot of our families are overwhelmed and
Of course.
struggling with,
Everything
a lot of
and all at the same time. I
yeah.
very much know that personally very well. It was interesting as you were talking about the siblings. We actually just had a blog come out this month from one of our community parents about the term glass children. Have you heard of it before?
No, and I
So
haven't the blog.
yeah, so I'll make sure again, I'll link it in the comments for everyone to read. It was they grew up as a glass child and now they're raising glass children. And the terminology basically means is that when you're a sibling and your sibling has high needs, whether it's AFCA, whether it's whatever it is that's happening, you tend to fall back and become see-through so that your parent, so you tend to step back and let your parent deal with or your caregiver support the child with higher needs, so you tend to lessen and get quieter, but the the impacts on mental health for that can be huge as well. So there's this new concept that I've heard of glass children. We did have a blog come out about it, and that parent provided some strategies about how they're helping their child who's the glass child to support themselves and give them that space to talk, and like you said, and to kind of help level the playing field a little bit because it's very difficult. And as parents, it's very difficult to feel like you're going to win all of it because it's not about winning. And it's the flip of a
Yeah,
coin. You feel like you're doing good with one, you're like, oh, yeah, what about this? Um, but I love that you talked about validating, and I'm terrible as well with not trying to fix the problem. I want to just jump in there and
we're
fix it.
fixers,
Oh
aren't we?
man. Give it to me, I'll tell it, I'll go to the school, but no, you're right. I think and it also gives them pieces of their power back that they may not have at home as well.
Like,
So,
and even with parents, sometimes it's like what they go through, it's enraging, and we're like, okay, what can we do? But maybe they just want to talk about it,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Without us wanting to fix it. So, yeah,
Well, it just shows that we care. So, but I think this was a really important conversation. I hope, Mo, that you're able to go back and read some of the comments because there's a
yeah,
lot of
I don't have
people.
access.
Yeah, I'll send you the link afterwards. There's a lot of people who are just very engaged with the comment and just very excited that we're actually naming this because there is a lot of judgment. So we have 3 minutes left, and I know Mo, you have to jump right into a training session. So I do want to thank you all for joining in. Again, this is going to be housed on our YouTube. I'll make sure to put links to all of the resources that we talked about. It's also going to stay on our Facebook page. Next month, we're going to be back in talking about restorative time in the holidays because it's coming. I have no idea how it's November 20th. I don't know what's going on, but we're here and we're going to talk about how to get time and restorative time for yourself. So Mode, thank you very much. Thank you everybody for watching, and let's keep having these conversations and let's keep talking about these things. So I appreciate you all, and we will see you again next month. Bye.
Thank you.